Good news on the Michigan front. All is quiet in the transfer portal. Welcome into the Voice of College Football. This is our daily transfer portal update. Appreciate you all being here at the Voice of College Football. Check out our Sooners live show that we posted earlier today with Parker Thune from OU Insider. Great conversation on Oklahoma football. Check it out. Later tonight, as you see on the banner right there, it is the Big Ten Live Show. It has moved to Friday at 7 o'clock Eastern Time. We appreciate everyone that made it for the first edition on Friday night. We had a nice crowd and good viewership, actually more so after the live rendition, which lets us believe that people couldn't find us or didn't get the notification for the live stream because we had kind of low turnout for the actual live stream when it was live. However, good viewership there for the replay. So it's a Big Ten Live Show tonight, Friday, 7 Eastern. Every Friday, 7 Eastern, we take your calls, and we hope to have some great guests stop by as well. We have some open invitations out there as well for a number of people that we're going to possibly stop by at some point this week. I'm not scheduling specific guests for specific days for this transfer portal update is what we're calling it, update live this week, and just wanted to see how this would be received and if this is something that you guys would want to see every day, if it would take off. And so we do have a number of people that could stop by. Otherwise, it will be a quick update. And if you guys have anything that you would like to talk about concerning the transfer portal, otherwise join us tonight at the Big Ten Live Show. We do have a call coming in. We've got Chris on the line. What's going on?
Good. How are you?
I am good. How are you? You're good? We're both good. Awesome.
I guess the question I have with respect to the portal, I guess, do these teams, I don't quite understand. Maybe you can help me figure it out. I know like in the NFL, they have like a roster, and if they can't fill a roster, I guess then they look outside. Is that kind of what's going on with the portal? They kind of, maybe if they can't completely, or is it something else that happens that makes it to where they have to fill a position? I mean, I don't know. I guess that's kind of what I was. Do they have to like look outside their own program to fill out some of these positions? Is that why they have that portal? Can you explain that to me?
Well, of course, everyone's looking to improve their football teams. So that's the main motivation, regardless of whether they have roster spots open or not. There are a ton of teams that are seeking out players in the transfer portal that are over the limit. So, for example, today we had an Oklahoma show, and our guy Parker Thune said that Oklahoma is 8 or 9 scholarships over limit right now. That does not mean that they won't be in the transfer portal. That does mean that they will be expecting and encouraging a number of players after spring practice to leave via the transfer portal because there's a certain date in the summer. It's probably either June 1st or July 1st, in which for the first time since before the COVID situation hit us in 2020, that these teams will have to hit scholarship limits of 85 and roster spot limits of 105.
Oh, okay. So that's what I didn't really know the whole dynamics of it. I understood a little bit about, I guess, past years where they would, when they recruited players, I think they would maybe, I didn't know exactly what the terms were as far as what secured a spot on the team, I guess. So I didn't know how many people they could keep on that. I thought there was like, I know in the NFL, it's only like about 45 players, isn't it? So
53
in the NFL?
53 in the NFL. And those are active players. They can keep players on the practice squad. They can keep players on injured reserve.
Well, I guess maybe what I'm trying to figure out, Mark, is the whole dynamic of it, it almost looks like they're kind of trying to, maybe help me figure it out if I'm wrong about it, but they're not trying to move towards more of a professional approach to this whole thing, where it's maybe less about, I don't know. I don't want to say it's less about being in school, but maybe less about the academic. Maybe it's more about what they can do as a football, or as an athlete, I guess. Is that what they're doing?
So not to be facetious, Chris, but I have to ask before I can answer that question, Who is they? They want to.
I don't know. I mean, I'm not that familiar with all these things, Mark. I just, I'm just trying to figure it out as I go, sort of thing. So, hope you don't mind trying to explain it to me if you know. But I guess my question would be, you said something about deadlines as far as, they have these, I guess, limits on scholarships. What you say it was like 80 or something. And so, I mean, is that as many people as they can keep on a team, or does it go beyond? Can they keep people on the team that aren't on scholarship, or how does that work?
Yeah. So to answer this question, sometime, I don't remember the year. I need to look this up and then remember the year, but it was sometime in the 90s that at one point in time, these coaches could put as many guys on their team as they wanted. They had unlimited rosters. I don't know if they had unlimited scholarships, but they had unlimited rosters. Now, at some point, the NCAA trimmed that to 85 scholarships and 105 roster spots per team. And I believe that was sometime in the 1980s or 90s. And so that's what we're working with. Now, what happened was when the pandemic hit in 2020, there was such chaos in college football concerning who was playing, how much they were playing. Teams like Alabama played 13 games,
Right.
and teams in the Pac-12 like Utah and Washington and Arizona State played 4 games. So without going case by case through 13 or 1400 players, it was decided that everyone would receive a COVID year, an extra year of eligibility.
Oh, I see.
And then beyond that, that continued to cause issues and a lot of paperwork for the ensuing seasons. So actually, these teams were given a pass in 2021, 22, and possibly 23, and just now are being held to those scholarship standards again.
Again, you said something about, because again, my level of understanding probably isn't very high, so you have to kind of bear with me a little bit. It seems to me, even like with 85, it seems like that's more than enough to fill. I mean, it surprises me that there'd be that many that many people on a team.
It's actually 105, but 85 scholarships. Yep.
So is there like, I mean, is there like a, I mean, it would seem to me like there'd only be like, you'd only need like maybe, I don't know, 35 players or 45 players, So why are there all these additional players? What, do they get to see out the field at all? Do they get to play? Or some of these players that aren't necessarily starters, what do? They just kind of, I don't see how they could put that many people on a team and still expect to really see any real, meaningful playing time without really being part of or is it just that they're there to kind of, how does that work? Do you know?
Well, you've got 11 on offense and 11 on defense on the field. Well, consider that the typical team is going to play, let's say, 3 running backs in a game. Let's say they're going to play 5 wide receivers. They're going to have 2 tight ends play at different times. And they're going to rotate in maybe an offensive lineman or 2. And this is if nobody gets hurt. And so we've already added 6 or 8 spots to the offense. Now the defense plays even more players because of nickel packages and different down and distance situations and rotating in cornerbacks and defensive linemen. Places like Georgia and Clemson like to play as many as 8 or 9 defensive linemen in a rotation in just 4 positions. So I would say the average Power 5 team plays 18 to 20 players on defense in a game.
Okay.
So we're looking at 20 on defense and we're looking at close to that many on offense. So you're in the high 30s, 36, 37, 38 players that play on offense and defense. Then you have special teams. You got a punter, you got a kicker, and then you've got different approaches to whether you're going to use starting players, offensive and defensive players on special teams. And a lot of teams don't play those players. They're playing their second and third stringers on special teams. So that's punt coverage, kickoff return, punt return, field goal, and extra point units. So we could add another 20 players there, and we're at the 60 mark.
Sure.
And then we're talking about injuries, and we're talking about these teams have 5 and 6 and 7 quarterbacks on their roster.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense. I mean, if you think about it, and I don't really put much thought into it, I guess. Sorry about that, but kind of makes sense that they would need a lot more than I guess I would anticipate maybe for a. But I would think, as far as with that many people, I guess, in a squad, I mean, that wouldn't be like difficult maybe to kind of get everybody on the same page. I mean, I just would think that would, I think there would be like a limit to the number of people you'd want on a team before it become maybe more trouble than it's worth, but maybe there isn't a limit. I guess they addressed that through maybe the assistant coaches. I don't know.
Well, I'm sure they addressed that through coaches at the time to better understand, okay, what's the sweet spot? Yeah, if they had 300 guys on a football team, that would be overkill, and they would be tripping over each other, and it would be a hassle. But if they had too few of guys, then of course that's also an issue. So they've arrived at a number, and as Hummus Hero is kind of backing me up here, because I was just throwing out rough dates, but Hummus Hero says prior to 1973, as I was alluding to, guys like Bear Bryant and Woody Hayes were known for just stockpiling teams with tons of players. The scholarship limits were unlimited before 1973. Then in 1978, they went to a 95 scholarship limit. And then in 1993, it went to 85. And that's where it currently stands.
So are these people that aren't on scholarship, are they just kind of, I mean, is that kind of the people that are just kind of there to, are they like the practice squad, or they're just kind of there to observe? I mean,
no, they can play. They're walk-ons. They can play. There are walk-ons that play for every school in the country every week.
Is it kind of like Rudy, where one guy kind of waits in the wings until he gets his chance? Is it kind of like that?
Well, it's kind of like that, but there are players that play for every major school in the country that are walk-ons. Now, are they playing starting positions? No, because then they'll get a scholarship. They're playing on, let's say, a little bit on special teams or at the end of 50-0 blowouts, but they're playing right at some point in the season.
Is there that much of an advantage, Mark, anymore to really, I mean, I know it used to be, with all the coverage, and I mean, maybe I think things have kind of changed, hasn't it, to where like you don't necessarily need to be on Oklahoma to get a lot of press coverage, do you? You can play for or is it to where, does it still work to a potential recruit's advantage to really seek to be on a more established program? Does that really work to their advantage, or seems to me like that's not necessarily as much of a problem anymore? I guess if it's a problem, I don't know.
When you say recruit, Chris, you're talking about a player that wants to get drafted and play in the NFL?
Well, that's what I don't like about it. I mean, is this all it's becoming now? Is it just kind of like college sports is now, it's just the pathway to get, I mean, it's not, we don't care about the college as much because it's more about making sure that these players get enough, preparation to where they can start in the NFL? Is that what it's becoming now? I mean, if it is, then I guess we just have to roll with it. But that's kind of the part I don't really understand, because I would think they want to, be part of the program and help build the program and leave a legacy. And it seems like they're more interested in kind of being, top pick in the NFL, which is fine. I mean, if you can do it, great. But I would think that they'd maybe want to kind of, I mean, it doesn't seem to me like they have their priorities straight. Maybe I'm wrong.
So, Chris, I agree with you. I don't like where this is headed. So I completely agree with you. However, there's a few things at work here. Anytime you introduce a lot of money into anything, then problems are going to exist. And so we can all complain about what college football looks like today, but we can also look in the mirror and see that we contributed to the popularity of college football that has escalated the revenue through television and attendance and merchandise and everything else, to the point where there's just so much money available that the players have earned, I'm not going to use the term deserved, they've earned money, compensation. Okay. Now, I believe that their scholarships are worth a lot of money. So I've always taken that stance that the scholarship is worth a lot of money, but it's now gone beyond that, of course. And we've got the NIL, the whole issue with NIL, and we could get into that. But to bring it back around to your question, yes, I would like to live in a world in which these guys are student athletes, student first, athlete second. They go to class, they achieve grades, they live on campus, they go to school, they earn a scholarship, they can work toward going to the NFL. That would be great. But even in this world of pay for play, is basically what it is at this point, and this pursuit of the NFL, it's still, the numbers have not changed. There are only so many of these guys that can go on to the NFL.
Yeah,
I'll tell you a little story, Chris, real quick, if you don't mind.
No, that's fine. Your show.
I was covering Mississippi State basketball while I was covering Mississippi State athletics and Ole Miss and Alabama, and I was down there, living down there and working for a TV station for a number of years. This is back in the late 1990s, early 2000s, and I'm watching Mississippi State basketball practice, and then after the practice, I'm standing there talking to Coach. I'm not interviewing him. We're just talking. And he had sent the team to the locker room. Well, the previous season, Mississippi State went to the Final Four, and they had 2 first-round NBA draft selections.
Okay.
And the coach, Richard Williams, very nice guy, very intelligent guy, said to me, he said, as we were in the process of talking, he said, how many of these players on my team do you think believe that they're going to play in the NBA? And I said, I don't know. He said, all of them.
Right.
He said they think they're going to play in the NBA because they play against NBA guys, future NBA guys in the SEC, and they also played with 2 last year. So they just all think they can do it too. And he said, do you know how many of them will play in the NBA? And I said, I wasn't going to insult his team, but I didn't think it was any. And he said, yes, none of them will play in the NBA, but they all think they're going to play in the NBA. And this is going to change the way they approach school and the way they approach life, and it's warped their thinking.
I don't know necessarily, though, in defense, I guess, of the people maybe that are involved, and it's not to take away from what you just said like at all. It's just that if I had that talent, which obviously I wouldn't, but I would want to set I'd want to get as far along as I could, so I can maybe understand the idea behind some of these players, assuming that's what they're doing, because I don't really know. They want to play for the best programs. I mean, that makes sense to me. And if they can't play for the best programs, then that's what this whole transfer portal makes sense to me a little bit, because it's like, well, if I'm not going to get to play for whatever team it might be, it's like, I can kind of see how it might enter the thinking that, well, I'll play at whatever, level, I guess. I guess there's like different levels, isn't there, Mark? To where it's like, maybe I'm not quite as good to play for this team, but maybe there's a team that's not, quite as good as this team that I might get to play for. Is that kind of what's happening a little bit? That there's like, maybe, I don't know what you call it. It's like a seeding of where these players belong. And that's kind of where they're put into the part where they fit. Does that make sense?
You're talking about in college football, not their hopes of playing in the NFL.
Well, I don't know. I guess what I'm trying to figure out on my own, I guess, Mark, would be, you put a player that isn't necessarily where they need to, I guess, like Alabama or whatever program, I guess it might be, that's maybe only looking for the best players. They might not want to have a player there that's not up to that. So they're going to have to find another team anyway. But, isn't that kind of what's going on? Is these players they're kind of moving until they finally find where they fit, and isn't that kind of what the transfer portal is? They're getting pushed out maybe at where they don't fit and then pushed back into place where they might fit. Isn't that kind of what's happening?
Yes, but not completely. That's what's happening with some players. With some players, they see that they're not good enough to play where they are, and so they're moving to another situation. Either they're assessing their situation as this particular position is stacked and I'm still really good, so I'm going to leave this Power 5 school, and I believe I can go play somewhere else. Or they're assessing it from the standpoint that I'm not good enough to play in the Power 5. I'm going to play at a Group of 5 school, and you see that happen. we also see it in reverse, where a lot of really good group of 5 players were underregarded as recruits, and they have proven to be excellent players in conferences like the Sun Belt and the MAC, and they play 2 or 3 years and they're outstanding, and they've elevated to a Power 5 program to play better competition and position themselves to get drafted.
So the idea, I guess, even for the maybe not the top tier players, is still to, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I would think some of them would kind of know that they're probably not going to be in the NFL. If you said it says the success rate is as low as it is, I'm not even sure why there's only so many players that even are, admitted to the NFL. And even them, I suppose, are kind of living on borrowed time, aren't they, as far as their career length?
Yes.
There are not that many that are playing. Do you know what the average career length is? Is it over like even 5 years?
No, it's nowhere close to that. It's like between 2.5 and 3.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, it's low. Now, that a lot of people like to assess or attribute that to injuries, and it's more so what you're alluding to. It's that there are constantly more players coming into the NFL every year. There's roughly 260 that get drafted, and almost all of them make a team. And then on top of that, you have another 30, 40, 50 free agents. So you've got about close to 300 players, something in that range, new players that go into the NFL every year from college. So that only lets us know that obviously about 300 players have to be cut that had jobs in the NFL, regardless of their injury status. They could be fully healthy, that they no longer have a job in the NFL.
Yeah, that makes sense, I guess. This whole movement, I guess, with I'm going to change the subject, and if you don't want to change it, that's good, I guess. But this whole idea, I guess, of including more teams in the championship, which is kind of what a playoff does. I'm not completely on board with that, Mark, and the only reason, it's not because I don't think it works. I think it probably does work, but I think in college, at least, I would think that it would be hard to get yourself fully prepared for each game, and the season's only about, isn't it only like about 12 weeks? I know that there's other games that they kind of fit in there. It's longer than 12, but I would think at some point they might even lose, maybe, at least I would. I think I would lose after about 12 weeks. I'd be like, I'm done. I think it's like, isn't it kind of, I don't quite understand what the whole idea behind lengthening the season necessarily does. That, I mean, I know that's something maybe that a person that isn't involved with it might want, but I would think that on a season, I don't know why we have to extend it beyond like even where it's at now to get, was there controversy about who should have won the champ? I don't really think I can't even really think of even one example where, oh yeah, there were so many other teams that were probably just as good as that. I mean, we could maybe make arguments for it, but I never really thought that there was that argument in any that I can think of. I mean, you'd probably know better than I would, but you don't think that I don't really know that there's really a need for a big, large playoff.
So what there's a need for versus what there is a appetite for are two different things, meaning
Right.
that I agree with you that rarely, if ever, do we have a fifth or sixth team that any of us really truly believe could have won the national championship or would win the national championship. However, with a 14 playoff, I routinely contend that there are another team or two that have just as much of a resume to be included in those 14 playoffs as other teams.
Okay.
However, that's not what's driving this. It's money. They can play more games and make more money.
Well, I mean, I understand that, I guess, but I would think at some point though, it's like, I mean, I'm not entirely against the idea of the 12-team playoff. I actually kind of think if they're going to have a playoff, I think that's probably as good a one as they could probably hope for. But I don't know. I just kind of, is that going to stop at 12? Are we going to start putting maybe, I don't know. I mean, and even if we do add more teams, even beyond that, it's like, it's kind of like the NCAA in basketball. I mean, yeah, we can have this tournament, maybe include as many teams as we can, and, maybe even get it down to where we get the right two teams in the title game or whatever. But I just kind of surprises me a little bit with all the I don't know what you call it. It's like the metrics that are available that we can't actually isolate it down to where we can probably figure out pretty closely who the two teams might be without a big, large tournament to use to figure it out. I guess I don't completely understand what that does, but, and the other part of it, especially in basketball, it's one and done. And I don't know. I mean, I remember Wichita State one year had a really good team. I don't know if you remember that year. I mean, they were probably as good as any other team. Well, they got beat by, some, I can't remember who beat them, but, okay, well, I guess they're not the national champion. Well, does one game really decide a national championship? I mean, I don't know. I mean, to me, it seems like we're kind of not really using the right protocols. Do you remember the shot that year? Maybe you don't.
Well, Chris, understand, I don't really. No, I haven't watched a basketball game in about 10 years. But to your point about deciding the championship and having all these games, what is the main motivation of the people in the chat, the people watching right now, all of us? What do we like most about college football? I think I can speak for not everyone, but almost everyone. What do we like most about college football?
I can't. You tell me. I don't know. I can tell you what I think, but
okay. Why do you like college? What do you like most about college football?
To put it simply,
yes.
I guess it's just the idea that you can. I mean, I never played in it, so I mean, I guess if it included me, it'd be just the idea I could participate. If you want to know the truth, and here we are, someone like me that would never get the opportunity to even participate, and then so we have to cater to these people that want to be on every play and get every, To me, that we have to cater to these people that are, pamper them almost to where it's like, now, if they don't play every play, they're going to go someplace where they will. And I mean, it just seems like it defeats the whole idea behind, I guess, the amateurism of it. I don't know.
Okay. The point I'm getting at is you had made the statement, why do we have to play all these games to determine a champion?
Yeah. I don't know what we.
For one thing, this is all for us. These coaches and these players make all the money, and of course they're important in that they have the skill set, they have the talent, the ability, and for us it's entertainment. But without the existence of us, this does not exist. They would be playing intramural sports at a university somewhere.
Well, that's kind of where I'm coming with it. It's like, so why do we have to cater to him? And, oh, well, he's not going to get to start, so he's going to go to Auburn or wherever, let him do it. I guess that's fine. I mean, he has that opportunity to try to make the team another place, but.
I'm trying to get back to your original point about why did there have to be so many games played? And what I was trying to lead to here is that people enjoy watching football games.
Yeah. I mean, I understand that. You understand? I mean, can I give one more example before you probably want to move on?
People enjoy having more football because that's the reason we're doing it.
Is that just
the reason I'm doing what I'm doing right now with these YouTube channels is because I enjoy watching football. If you want to boil all of it down, it's because I enjoy watching football.
No, that's fine. No, there's nothing wrong with that, I guess, but it's just pure entertainment. There's nothing else besides, I mean, I don't know. I mean, anyway, there one other thing I was going to ask you, I guess. I think I've already told you about it, and I think you probably already know about it, I guess. But last season when I know it's kind of something maybe people don't want to talk about, but it's relevant. So I'll just, when Texas Christian beat Michigan, what it did actually, I think it did a little bit more than just put them in a position where they could win a title. I think what it actually did was it created kind of a logjam. I don't know if you really want to, this is the year before, by the way, to where, it kind of made it hard. And if Ohio State would have beaten Georgia, then you would have had 4 teams with kind of roughly the same record. So at that point, I think the only fair way to resolve that would have been a playoff of 4 teams. But without a playoff, it's the interesting part was, according to what you say is relevant, do you know who the national championship would have been in that position if it had just been without a playoff? Who would have won it?
There were 2 undefeated teams in the regular season, so they would have played for the national championship.
Talking with after they played all the games and before the championship game.
Before the championship game.
Yeah, if Ohio State would have beaten Georgia, which I know they didn't, but if they'd have made that field goal, which they didn't.
Okay, there's a big flaw in what you're saying before I answer your question, Chris. Your
What?
flaw is that you are stripping away the playoff to determine who should have played in a national championship game, but you're including the first playoff game to determine who would have played in the national championship game. You can't do that.
Exactly. Well, no, I just, you said you gave a priority to the head-to-head, and the head-to-head would have fallen towards TCU, but that's only if Ohio State would have beaten Georgia. It would have fallen to where if you go straight by head-to-head, I don't know that it necessarily changes anything, but my point would have been that, to really get down to one team, I guess you almost would have needed to put all four in a championship. But without that, if you just restrict it to results, I guess, it would have, or at the very least, it would have lent credence to TCU to actually have been the legitimate national champion that season. But that's only if Ohio State would have beaten Georgia, which they didn't. You understand how that might have worked?
If Ohio State would have beaten Georgia,
well, yeah.
Then you're saying who would have been the national champion?
I'm just basing it on what you told me on other seasons where you had like controversy. You said, well, if we have controversy, we have to go head to head. We have to look at head to head. Well, it would have been Texas Christian beating Michigan. Michigan would have beaten Ohio State. Ohio State would have beaten Georgia. So, I mean, at that point.
And you're determining a national champion that way.
Yeah, without a championship. Yeah. I don't know how you could say that.
You would have started to play a playoff, and then you would have stopped after one game and said, oh, we don't need to play the championship game because they beat them, and they beat them, and they beat them. So we're deciding who the champion is.
No, I'm just using what you told me that you said was the right protocol to use in a case that there was controversy. You told me, oh, no, we can't give it to Florida State in 93 because Notre Dame beat Florida State. We better give it to Notre Dame because they beat Florida State. So I'm just taking the same approach. And I know that Georgia beat Ohio State, but if Ohio State had made that field goal, what I think it is actually, in fairness to the situation, I think it's a four-way tie. I don't think there's a national champion in that case, but based on what you told me.
That's why you play a championship game.
Exactly. I just wondered what you thought about it. I'm not trying to twist your arm or nothing.
I think it's stupid.
Well, if it's stupid, then how come you're trying to rechange all the past years that we say that Florida State doesn't deserve a championship because Notre Dame? You can't use the same approach in one season and not use it in another one.
You have basically given me a scenario in which you are using the playoff to determine who would win the championship, but saying after the first game is played that you wouldn't play the championship. You would just play the first round and then decide who the champion is.
Exactly.
That's beyond. I cannot begin to describe how asinine that is.
Okay.
That is
well, it doesn't really matter because Ohio State lost to Georgia. But I'm just saying if they'd have made that field goal, what we could talk about now is the possibility that Texas Christian won a national championship.
No, we wouldn't talk about that because they would have still played a game the next week against Ohio State or Georgia, whoever won the other game.
Ohio State.
Okay, so then TCU would have played Ohio State for the national championship.
Okay.
And we would have had a national championship based on the game played, not based on they beat them and they beat them and they beat them. Oh, we're going to make them the national champion.
Okay. Anyway, that's all I was going to tell you. I just thought you might be interested in it because it kind of falls along a little bit with what you say matters. So if you don't agree with it, you don't have to.
Oh, I don't. I don't know that there would be a sane person alive that would agree with what you just.
I don't understand how you can say that in one circumstance when you don't have a playoff, it chooses a correct team, and then the other one it doesn't. If Ohio State makes that field goal, it was a 50-yard field goal. I don't know how easy it is. Probably was a hard field goal. But...
Number one, there are so many ways I could attack this. I don't even know which one to choose, but we'll start with this. First of all, you are utilizing a playoff to make your determination, but at the same time, you're arguing against the playoff, but you're going to utilize playoff games, but not play the championship game.
Yeah. Well, not entirely. I mean,
that's not how the playoff works. The playoff has.
I think I've made it sure
that lead into a championship game.
I made it.
You want to play two semifinal games and then stop and say we're going to decide the champion.
Not exactly, but I guess if you want to,
you just said.
No, I don't like the playoff, Mark, because I don't know that it really works that well. But regardless, I'm just saying without a championship game, if you take that out of it, and if you just follow what you say is important, I'm not sure how you can argue any different than the fact that TCU would have won a national championship if Ohio State had made that field goal. How can you say that they wouldn't have? I don't understand how you can come to that, but that's just an opinion. It's your protocol. That's kind of my point.
It's not my protocol. My protocol is to play a championship game.
Well, if you can.
And in years in which there was no championship game, and we're looking back on history, I'm making an evaluation of the records and the results. That's because we can't go back in time and take a 50-year-old Barry Sanders and make him a 22-year-old again. We can't turn back the clock and replay the games and then have these teams play each other. So we can't do that.
Can I just throw one more idea out at you and you can throw it away if you don't like it? Okay, this is something entirely different. And people don't like talking about it, and I don't know that I blame them. It looks to me like for justification for BYU's championship, it looks to me like the national, just for whatever, funsies or whatever, the national championship game they played in, I think, was against Pittsburgh in week 0. Are you on board with that?
No. Oh boy. Are you ready for me to cut loose on this one?
Well, I mean, go ahead, but I mean, that's the one game I think that if they didn't win it, they're out. So yeah.
Okay. We need to make sure that everyone that's listening, if their brains and their ears can stand it, are understanding of what we're talking about, because people aren't necessarily all locked in on 1984, Chris. So let's serve them that to start. Okay, so in 1984, BYU won the national championship. They were awarded the national championship after they went undefeated. They were the only team in the nation that went undefeated. You are telling me that a Pittsburgh team that went, you give me the record because I know it and you know it, but I just want you to say what their record was that year.
3-7-1.
3-7-1.
Yeah, that's what they were.
Yes. And this game was the national championship game?
It's like a playoff. It's almost like a playoff in reverse. It's when you start off with the toughest game. Yeah, it's almost like, and so, yeah, I know it's not going to suit well with most people, and I don't expect that they would necessarily sign on to it, Mark, but what it kind of did, though, there's like a weird kind of dynamic that came through through the course of the season, where what it actually did was it made it to where Brigham Young, they don't necessarily win the championship. But with Iowa, I know people don't understand that whole concept there, but if you look at it, and if you kind of look at it without trying to be too critical of it, Iowa at 8-4-1, that's enough to pull Brigham Young up high enough to where together they actually meet the standard that's necessary to claim a championship. So it's like BYU only really won about half a championship. Anybody's. Well, to make it to where it matters. People are saying, well, they didn't play a tough enough schedule. They didn't beat enough good teams. They didn't all this and that. Well, I kind of pieced through that. And you can't really say that about Iowa. And so when you put them together, collectively, they actually earn enough to where it's like
what does Iowa have to do with it?
Well, I tried to explain that to you once before.
I know you have. You've tried and you were unsuccessful because they don't have anything to do with it. Iowa did not play BYU.
Well, not that year, but anyway.
Exactly.
They pull in the slack. They pull in the slack.
Explain. I'm gonna shoot myself for asking this question. I know I am. I'm gonna regret it, but I'm gonna ask you anyway. How in the world can you justify an argument of determining a championship based on games that were played in other seasons? I can't even believe I'm asking that question. It's so insanely ridiculous.
Referencing the previous season where BYU beat the two teams that Illinois got beat by. Well, I mean, the reason I brought that up was because BYU beat two teams that beat Illinois that finished 10-2 that otherwise would have been 12-0. I mean, I don't know how you can just look at that and say, well, that's not important. BYU beat the two teams. Well, they did. I mean, it's like,
in what year?
The year before.
The year before.
Right.
They're called football seasons. You have the 1983 season, you have the 1984 season, you have the 1985 season. You have individual seasons. You understand that there were players on these teams that played on particular teams that didn't play the year before or play the year after.
No, I
These
understand
are
that.
different teams.
Steve Young was the quarterback. I mean, he wasn't the
Who
quarterback.
cares?
Yeah,
Dan Marino was the quarterback of the Miami Dolphins for like 17 or 18 years. Does that mean that we can say 10 years after they went to the Super Bowl that Miami should have been in the Super Bowl 10 years later because Dan Marino was still the quarterback?
no, the point I was making with that, I know what you're trying to tell me, but I guess the point I was making was it's the idea that you could have a team like BYU, whether you like them, don't like them, hate them, love them. I don't know. People don't have to love them. It's fine. But, your whole point was that they didn't, at least the way I understood it, maybe I'm wrong to even say it. You said that they didn't really play anybody that was really even any good, is kind of what I think you told me. Well, I went back, Mark, just to find out whether or not you were fair about that or not. And what I determined, and you can say whether I did it right or wrong, maybe I didn't. I think they played a team when they played Air Force in '84. I have Air Force being at least as good as Auburn was. Now, I know Auburn probably was better. I'm not going to be like, oh, Air Force was better than Auburn. Auburn probably was better. But they played a team as good as Auburn to win the Western Athletic. I mean, they just did. In '84, they beat a team that was about as good as Auburn.
Air Force record was what? 7-3-1, I believe.
8-4.
8-4. Yeah. So the best team that BYU played that year in winning a national championship was 8-4.
Sure.
Against a lousy schedule. So they didn't even beat an 8-4 team that was playing a legitimate schedule.
Well, like I said, Mark, I had them in the top 20. I think that's fair according to what they were. And the other thing was that Air Force had beaten pretty good. All right, 7-5. I don't know. You tell me. Maybe it isn't good.
We're awarding national championships to teams that can beat 7-5 teams.
Notre Dame. Air Force beat Notre Dame. Notre Dame beat LSU. Notre Dame beat USC.
Whoa. You're going the 7 degrees to a national championship.
Well, not exactly, but they beat a good Notre Dame team is my point. If you don't want to agree that they're a good Notre Dame team, that's fine. I think 7-5 is a pretty good team, but whatever. That's who Air Force beat.
Again, we're not talking about pretty good. We're talking about awarding national championships.
I understand that.
If we were going to award national championships based on beating 7-5 teams, then half the nation would have a national championship every year.
Well, I mean, I understand where you're coming from on that a little bit, Mark, but I don't know if you're being completely fair in your dissection of me, but that's fine. I mean, you definitely have
it's a BYU, and it's nothing against BYU. They just happen to be the team that was awarded a national championship after playing a lousy schedule.
Well, okay. They invited Washington. Washington, I guess, didn't want to play. It doesn't really matter I don't care what the reason is. Maybe they just didn't want to play, But they did try to play Washington. I mean, what else are they supposed to do? I don't quite understand. They invited them.
They're not supposed to do anything.
Well, how can you punish BYU for trying to
I'm not punishing them.
And you say that Michigan, okay, the last point, and then I'll let you move on because I know you don't like talking about this. They played a team that was roughly.
I've been talking about it for like a half hour for not wanting to talk about it. I have no issue with talking about it. It's just crazy.
Northwestern. They played a team that was as good as Northwestern. So what's your estimation of Northwestern then? They played a team
1984?
No, this year.
What's this year have to do with what was going on in 1984?
Well, they both were 5-4. I mean, they're both about the same. That's the point I'm making. They played a team that was as good as Northwestern. So how good was Northwestern?
This year?
Yes.
They're about the 40th best team in the country. Something in that range.
No,
25 to 40.
Okay, well, I have them lower than that, but that's fine. I have them number
5.
So you think they're okay
after a bowl win?
They didn't play a team as good as Northwestern, but they played a team that had the same. I'll even give you that much about it too. But they played a team with the same, roughly the same record as a conference team as Northwestern. And you don't think that matters? That's not important. That doesn't really prove anything. They played it. Well, who are they supposed to play then to be any good? I don't get it. Who do they need to beat?
If we would look at any other national championship team throughout history, especially in the last 10 years, and especially since the BCS era, we would see that those teams played a number of, I'm not talking about 1, 2, 3, I'm talking about 4, 5, 6 quality teams.
Sure.
And usually 2 or 3 of those were top 5 to 10 teams in the country.
Okay.
The best game, the best win on a national champion's schedule should not be the 37th best team in the country.
Well, my point, I guess, Mark, I'm not making it very clearly, is I think there's a little bit more meat on that. There's a little bit more meat on that bone than you're giving me. There's a little bit more meat on that bone, I think, than you're giving me. And it's like, if you want to make it like every team they played was terrible, I mean, to me, that's just
I didn't say that they were terrible. I'm saying that beating a 6-6 team in a bowl game does not justify a national championship.
Well, okay, a team that only gave up 6 passing touchdowns and only gave up, you know what I mean? I mean, that how many teams are able that play a lot of good passing teams that only give up 6 passing touchdowns and give up 2 in the bowl game? Michigan gave up 6 passing touchdowns that year before they played BYU. BYU scored 2 passing touchdowns in the fourth quarter, by the way, in one quarter. At some point, I think you have to kind of give a little bit of,
that they had a good team. They had a good team.
Okay.
I'm not trying to take away their national championship. I am simply saying that there were other teams that earned a national championship as much as they did.
As much. I agree. I don't know that I disagree with you on that, but not more. That's kind of my point. It's like maybe as much, but not. I think Washington and BYU were about the same. It's kind of
I'm not taking away their national championship. I'm just saying it's a pathetic situation when we're awarding a national championship for a team that did not even beat one good team the whole year.
Air Force was as good to almost win a title the next year. I mean, I know they didn't, but you know why they didn't, right? The reason they didn't win it in 1985 is because BYU beat them. And you can't tell me that without any doubt that Air Force, if they'd have played Penn State, necessarily would have lost. I mean, maybe you can give me evidence to show that it might have not have. If BYU
was not the same season.
Well, how far off does it have to be before it becomes relevant? It's kind of the point I'm making.
It has to be played that season. The games that we're discussing have to be played the same season of the championship we're discussing, not played a year later, 10 years later, 20 years later, the same season.
I already made this point too, but when North Carolina played Kansas in the NCAAs, they were an 8 seed to a tournament. Now, I don't know for sure that necessarily a tournament with 32 teams would have included Michigan in '84, but they both finished, I think, in the same position against the conferences. So there's at least a fair chance that maybe North Carolina as an 8 seed to a tournament, and Michigan, if there would have been a tournament, all they would have had to do was win 5 games. You know how many games Michigan won in 1985 before they lost to Iowa? 5. That's kind of like, I mean, you're kind of like, at some point, I think you're going to have to admit, Mark, that I might be right about this. North Carolina only had to win 5 elimination games to play Kansas.
You were making up some other, I won't even call it a scenario because it's so insanely ridiculous.
Is it?
Yes, it is.
Why?
It is ridiculous.
Michigan would have had to win 5 successive games in a championship to play BYU.
They went 6-6. Now you have taken this ludicrous discussion to the point where you're telling me that a team that went 6-6 may have been good enough to win a national championship.
Yeah, maybe. Well, they didn't, but yeah, they were on the cusp. I'm not saying that they were good enough. I told you where they were, Mark. They were 50th, according to where I put them, which you can throw that out if you want to, but
Chris, basically, if we are going to take your argument concerning 1984 and place it in this current football season that we just watched in 2023,
right?
Rutgers is good enough to win a national championship. South Carolina is good enough to win a national championship. Oregon State's good enough to win a national championship. Iowa's good enough to win a national championship. All these teams are good enough to win. Texas A&M, they are the national champion too. All these teams that go 6-6, 7-5, whatever the record, they're all good enough to win national championships.
Well, I don't know if that's exactly what I'm trying to tell you, but
you are.
No,
you're telling me that a Michigan team in 1984 that went 6-6 could have won 5 consecutive games in a tournament.
I'm saying they did win 5 consecutive games. I'm not saying they could have.
They didn't win 5 consecutive games against the kind of quality teams that they would play in a national championship tournament.
Actually, that's the part where you're wrong. You can go back.
No, I'm not wrong. No. Don't play that No. Don't tell me when I'm wrong, when I'm not wrong. If you looked at Michigan's schedule, they did not play 5 consecutive games and win those games against the type of competition that they would play in a national championship tournament. No.
You might have to eat your words on that one, Mark.
I am not eating my words because I know exactly what in the hell I'm talking about. You are completely insane concerning this topic and have proven it about 497 times.
I think actually what I demonstrated, and I don't want to waste your time.
You've not demonstrated anything but insanity.
I think what I actually demonstrated was that BYU and Iowa collectively, because BYU didn't beat Michigan in '85, it was Iowa. But Iowa, they weren't that much, I don't even know if they were better than BYU. It doesn't really matter. But the point is, my argument always has been that Iowa and BYU were about the same.
And, Iowa lost 4 games. Iowa lost 4 games in 1984. Do not even bring them up about a national championship. What are you talking about?
That's the part, if you don't want to listen to me, I guess you don't have to, Mark. It's like,
I've listened way too much. I have been listening.
They need Iowa to cover the space that they need to make it to where they can be in the national championship. And, they actually played Iowa in '91 and they tied. I don't know. How much more evidence do I have to give you before at some point you have to admit that maybe I might know what I'm talking about?
You don't
They played
know what
a team in 1990, you know what I'm talking about. They played Iowa and they tied.
If you intentionally wanted to make up things that are just so incredibly ridiculous, I wouldn't be able to do that. You have a rare gift. You have a rare gift that I don't possess.
No. I'm not making anything up. Go back and look at it. And then the interesting thing about that was the only reason BYU lost to Iowa is BYU missed an extra point. If they'd have made that extra point, then they would have beaten Iowa. That's fact. But I know that was several years later. 7 years later. All right. Thanks, Mark. Have a good night.
I guess I endured that for a few different reasons. It was like half annoying and aggravating and half amusing. I guess also I just jumped out of the shower and I'm all clean and refreshed, and so I can shoot. I've sat here for the other night almost 7 consecutive hours. So when I just sit down and I'm ready to roll. So and obviously no one else called. And on top of that, I think as soon as we end this stream, what am I going to do? I'm going to be going back to work and preparing for the Big Ten show tonight at 7 o'clock Eastern time, or I could do a number of other things related to our Find the Voice of College Football channel. So there's a lot of things that would be more productive to do, but that's what we did. That's what we chose to do with our lives and our brain cells for the last 20 minutes or so. All right. We are going to check out the super chat, so I appreciate those. We've got Barry chiming in with this one. The amount of people certain and celebrating that Michigan is imploding. I don't know what the amount is myself. Sharon Moore is 4-0. He recruited all of these players to Michigan. They have plenty of talent remaining. So there are a lot of people that are saying that Michigan has had its run and that's it, and they are done and they will never gain these type of heights again. And truth be known, I don't know and you don't know and nobody knows, because Michigan has not been an elite football program for, even when they won the national championship in 1997, I would not call them an elite program. Now, all time, are they elite? Of course, Michigan is elite all time, but I'm talking about in the moment. I don't even know if they were elite that year, because the season before they were 1996, that was the year they lost to Alabama in the Outback Bowl. They were 8-4. And then the next year they were 1998. Who they beat in a bowl game? Arkansas. I think they finished 9-3. So they were a top 15. They were not elite. So they just, bam, ascended for a national championship and then back to good team, good program, really good, top 10 to 15. So the last time Michigan sustained elite play would be, of course, right now. This is a third consecutive year, which I would consider to be an elite season, a Big Ten championship, and a college football playoff appearance. And then, of course, knocking down the door this year. So the amount of people certain and celebrating that Michigan is imploding. Sharon Moore's 4-0. Yeah. Yeah, he coached somebody else's team, Jim Harbaugh's team, to 4-0. And I give him a lot of credit for that because those were 3 of the 4 were difficult games. 2 of them really good opponents. 1 good opponent in Maryland. So yeah, Sharon Moore did a nice job. Again, I don't pretend to know, and anybody that tells you that they know what Michigan's going to do in the future, or really anyone, any team, we don't know that Georgia's going to stay elite. We don't know that Alabama's going to stay elite. So those people that say that they do know, of course they don't. We don't know the future. But I am safe in saying that Michigan's not going to fall off the rails and be a 6-win program going forward. I don't know that they're going to stay elite. If they do, that's not going to surprise me. They certainly have the resources and the backing and the wherewithal, the infrastructure to do so. So most of the people that are saying all those things, Barry, I would think are Ohio State fans. So consider the source. Just like consider the source during this entire scandal with the NCAA investigation about the cheating. Every Michigan fan said, we didn't need to cheat to win. It doesn't matter. We didn't need to cheat. They were way off on this end of the spectrum. And then everybody anti-Michigan was, they cheated. They're the worst. They needed to cheat. And neither is true. Neither is true. And again, we will find out at some point, hopefully, how systemic the cheating was. Was there cheating? Yes, there was cheating. Anyone who denies that is not facing reality and the truth. Now, that doesn't mean that the coaching staff was cheating. That doesn't mean that the players were cheating. That means that there was an individual on staff who was cheating. All right, the amount of people certain and celebrating that Michigan is imploding. Sharon Moore 4-0, recruited all these players to Michigan. They have plenty of talent remaining. Well, he was recruiting the offensive players. All right, and many of them are leaving, but excellent players leave every football program. This happens when you run a top-flight football program. Players leave every program, of course, through the transfer portal and through graduation or through eligibility running out. And then when you have a really strong football program, then you have a lot of players that leave early. And so when you reach that elite status, or you're able to recruit talented players to the level and develop them to the point where they leave early, that's a great place to be in. You don't like to see the guys leave early, but that means that the program is succeeding. And Michigan just won a national championship. So Michigan fans, don't be angry and defensive. You won the national championship. You're 15-0. I would let that slide off my back. I would be somewhat concerned based on what we know. I would be somewhat concerned, of course, until an investigation is complete about what that is going to tell us. I don't think it's going to uncover much more. I don't think that. All right, Erica, thank you so much for being here. Mark, you get a tenner. Thank you for that, for taking this call. By the way, Iowa's two offensive coordinator contenders are Tim Lester. Okay, we know about Tim Lester, and Kevin Johns. Any thoughts on those two? So I would have to look at Tim Lester's current resume to see where he actually has been located currently. But Tim Lester has a long history at a number of stops that I am familiar with, but can't say that I've really tracked him recently. Tim Lester. And then I'll be able to speak better too once it refreshes my memory. And I'll tell you where I remember Tim Lester from the most. So he just was an analyst with the Green Bay Packers this one season. Of course, coming off the Western Michigan head coaching job, 2017 to 22. So 6 years at Western Michigan. And I got to think his record was 500. There you go, 37 and 32. Yeah. It's funny that I see 37 and 32 because as soon as I saw that record, I thought, I kind of knew that. Anyway, 37 and 32, went to 3 bowl games in 6 years. Their offense at Western Michigan. Now, he, of course, took over for Erica. This is going to fit in well. He took over for, do you know, at Western Michigan? I'm putting this together because I see the year 2017, and I know that this guy left after 2016 because he had a remarkable run in 2016 with Western Michigan, going undefeated in the regular season and going to the Cotton Bowl, and then he got a big job. Your buddy PJ Fleck, of course, was the predecessor for Tim Lester. And let's see his other coaching stops before that. Syracuse quarterbacks and recruiting coordinator. So he must have been at Syracuse. That would have been right after Ryan Nassib, who parlayed his Syracuse career into a surprising first-round NFL draft selection. What I would do, as I've done in the past, would be to take a guy like Tim Lester and say, okay, we're most specifically looking at him as an offensive coordinator, not a head coach. We don't necessarily need to evaluate the entire performance of the team. He did a nice job at Western Michigan. It's tough to go 37 and 32 at a place like Western Michigan because MAC schools lose almost all their non-conference games because they beat up on like an FCS team, and then their other 3 non-conference games are usually against Power 5 teams, and they lose all of them, like 90% of them. And so he had to have really good MAC records, solid MAC records, 26 and 20. So he did a nice job at Western Michigan. They had one of the better records in the MAC. But I would need to look at what would be a great comparison is look at the offense at Western Michigan under PJ Fleck and then see what it was with Tim Lester and then see how he upgraded the offense or how it may have regressed. But he was there through 2022. And then Western Michigan this last season, I think they went 5-7 without Tim Lester. So that's pretty much in line with what they were before. At Syracuse, I don't know that he was also the offensive coordinator. So to see how well they did with and without Tim Lester, that's what I do quite a bit when I'm looking at those kind of evaluations, is to see, for a guy that was an offensive coordinator, how good was Syracuse before he got there, and then how good were they once he took over and then once he left. Quarterbacks coach at Purdue in 2016. 2016 was just prior to Jeff Brom. So, man, Purdue was lousy the year he was there in 2016. They were like a 3-9, 2-10 team that particular season. So, and a high school coach and small college coach before he got to Syracuse. He was a head coach at Elmhurst in 5 seasons. So, I think what you're looking at here, Erica, so I can't speak obviously too specifically to his performances on the offensive side of the ball, but I would speak more to his ability to hold down a decent job for 6 years So he knows what he's doing. He's a capable football coach, organizer, leader. I think that's pretty self-evident. Leicester coach David Blau, who then went on to the NFL with the Detroit Lions, I believe. Yes. In his one season at quarterbacks coach with David Blau as the player there at quarterback, and David Blau was a good player, wasn't a great player, but he was good enough to get a couple contracts in the NFL, or one contract, is that Purdue averaged 295 yards. You would love this, Erica. Purdue averaged 295 yards passing per game, 21st in the country. Can you imagine if Iowa averaged 295 yards passing per game, 21st in the country? And that was before Jeff Brom stepped in and Leicester lost his job because Jeff Brom was the quarterback coach, the offensive coordinator. He was the guy that ran the offense. He didn't lose his job. Leicester did not lose his job because he was not doing a good job. All right. And then, Kevin Johns. Well, Kevin Johns at Duke was coaching Riley Leonard, of course. And let's see how long he was at Duke. Oh, yeah. We talked about Kevin Johns on the show with Corey the other day. We were looking at his run. This is all coming back to me. So Kevin Johns, to me, has had a more successful run as an offensive coordinator. He's got a longer resume as an offensive coordinator in big programs and more successful programs. Offensively, not talking about their record necessarily, but Duke in 22 and 23, really good offenses. Not great, not prolific, but he took a lot of three-star talent. He will be coaching better talent, at least better recruited talent at Iowa than he did the last 2 years at Duke. And they had a really good offense under Riley Leonard, even though he got hurt this last season. Duke went 9-4, 8-5 the last 2 years and had really good functioning offenses, really good functioning offenses. The other thing, though, with Kevin Johns here is that he was coaching a mobile, very mobile, athletic quarterback at Duke the last 2 years. Now, in the 3 seasons prior to that, he was the offensive coordinator at Memphis. Excellent offense at Memphis. And the first season there was under Mike Norvell. So I'm sure he learned under Mike Norvell, who's one of the best play callers and offensive minds in college football. Prior to that, he worked with our guy, Tim Lester, as his offensive coordinator at Western Michigan for one season. So Tim Lester's first season at Western Michigan was as the head coach with Kevin Johns as the offensive coordinator. And then prior to that, Kevin Johns was the offensive coordinator at Indiana. And though Indiana didn't win a lot of games, they were good on offense in those seasons with Kevin Wilson as the head coach. They had really good running back play and a good wide receiver play. And so Kevin Johns has a better offensive resume, and it's really not that close. But again, Tim Lester was leading a MAC program for 6 years there. So hopefully that helps out. When I look at their resumes, then it brings back a lot up here. David, thank you so much for the contribution. We appreciate you. David is all out on this national championship season. Boy, David, you do what you want. You do your thing there. If you want to be that hopeful, and optimistic, that's great. We should be hopeful in life. But man, 2024 national champions, Ohio State. The team up north, going back to Rich Rod years, and you will lose Walmart Wolverine fans. Well, I don't want to lose our Wolverine fans here at the Voice of College Football. Don't want to lose those people. We'll be kind to you, even through 7-5. We will be kind to you. So, you have a national championship that is more recent than anybody's national championship. David, thank you so much for that. No, do not tell us that we're going to lose our Wolverine fans here. We don't want that. Not at all. We do appreciate everyone being here. And we also want to remind everyone that we are coming back. Thank you, Erica. We appreciate your support. Thanks for being here. You know what show Erica watches every week that I know about is the Hawkeyes live show that we do with Corey Bratta every Tuesday. We would grab everybody here, come on over to the Iowa channel, 5:30 Eastern, 4:30 Central. It's every Tuesday. We have a great time. We would love to see you there. And again, tonight it's the Big Ten live show. So we will talk Big Ten football for at least 2 hours. The Big Ten live show is coming up at 7 p.m. Eastern time. We will take your calls and possibly have some folks stopping by. Keep in mind, we've got an SEC channel. We've got a Big 12 channel. So please check them out, the SEC channel and the Big 12 channel. You can grab those links there in the description section of the videos. All right, folks. Appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. Oh, this was supposed to be a transfer portal update. I believe, unless things have changed, I believe we have just one to update. Here we go. One in the transfer portal is this guy. Washington defensive back Asa Turner is committed to Florida. Okay. I can't give you a scouting report. I cannot give you a scouting report on Asa Turner. I will say that we had some more transfer portal news with Parker Thune of OU Insider. Check out the Sooners live stream we did earlier today. He had some news that's coming down soon with a couple of Washington transfers to Oklahoma. Washington losing half its team. So a lot of guys leaving Washington. And I don't see that they're picking up. They are picking up. I always found this interesting as well. Also found this interesting. Top 10 players in the transfer portal, according to 247 Sports. Okay. Look where these players played last season and look at where they will be playing this season. My point here is this doesn't necessarily prove everything, but this proves a lot. This is where they played last year. They played in the SEC, SEC, Pac-12 defunct, SEC, what will now be the Big Ten, SEC, and there you go. And they are going to Big Ten, Big Ten, SEC, Big Ten, Big Ten, Big Ten, Big Ten, Big Ten, and SEC. All of these 10 players will be playing either in the Big Ten or the SEC this coming season, all played in what is now a Big Ten or SEC school, except for one, Aiden Childs, the Michigan State quarterback who comes in from Oregon State. And that's the big acquisition there for Jonathan Smith at Michigan State. Big Ten live show coming up at 7 p.m. Eastern time. Appreciate you all being here. Anything else that I need to see? I do not believe so. Thank you so much for everything. We'll see you in about 1 hour and 45 minutes. How about that?